All right, good morning, everyone. I see the Zoom room is filling up. It's 9 o'clock. Happy Valley time. It is almost time for us to start coffee hour this morning. We have a great guest. Wanda Bryant Hope is with us. She is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Johnson & Johnson. We look forward to passing her story on to you. If you have any questions for Wanda, go ahead and feel free to drop those in the Q&A tab on the Zoom video window or in the comments on Facebook Live. I see we are now live on Facebook. Welcome to those of you joining us out there. As always, we want to know who you are and where you're zooming in from today. Go ahead and put that information in the chat so we can say hello and welcome you into Coffee Hour. Again, a great program lined up today with Wanda Bryant Hope, the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Johnson & Johnson. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Thanks for joining us. I see Chris Waldron from Washington, D.C. and Bill Campbell from Indianapolis. Welcome. Good to have you joining us on Coffee Hour this morning. We'll get started in just a minute. I see Brian Schwarm joining us. Brian Schwarm, good to see you, Brian. Our good friend Daryl Daisy tuning in, and Willie Lancaster. Excellent. Brian's in Jacksonville, Florida. I think we're getting some Jacksonville type weather here in Happy Valley today. Looking for the high 70s, low 80s today here in State College. Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to the Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. Each week, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State Network. We are recording this session and closed captions are available for this event. You can find that information in the chat in Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. I'm pleased to welcome Wanda Bryant Hope. Wanda is an accomplished business executive with significant experience in general management, marketing, sales, commercial operations, and human resources. She currently serves as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Johnson & Johnson and was responsible for globally advancing the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes, strengthening DE&I capabilities, and driving growth through innovation. A marketing graduate of Penn State Smeal College of Business, Hope serves on Smeal's Board of Visitors. In 2020, she was named a member of the Penn State Presidential Council on Racism, Bias, and Community Safety by President Eric Barron. Most recently, she gave Penn State's commencement speech to the fall graduating class of 2020. Actually, I think that was the spring graduating class of 2020. Welcome to the program, Wanda Bryant Hope. How are you this morning, Wanda?
I'm doing fine, Paul, but it will not allow me to start my video. There we go.
There you go.
Hi.
How are you? Good morning.
I'm doing great. How are you doing this morning, Paul?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited about our conversation. We have a lot to cover in the next hour. And let's just get right to it. Why don't you let folks know how you became a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Oh, well, that's a fun story. So, Paul, you know, my dad used to say that since I was 10 years old, for some reason, I've always said I wanted to go to Penn State. I had no idea what experience I had, what I saw that made me say that, but it's something I said from a very, very young age. And then when we started looking at colleges and, you know, we're doing sort of the college tour, my junior year of high school, I started visiting schools and I walked onto the Penn State campus and it felt and looked to me exactly what college was supposed to be. The Elm Line Mall, the library, the environment, it just looked and felt to me like what college was supposed to be. So about, I don't know, 10 minutes into the tour, which a line ambassador was delivering, I looked at my parents and I said, this is it, this is where I'm going. And they were sort of like, can we finish the tour first? And I was like, yeah, no, this is it. This is my school. And luckily it all worked out. And I've had a lifelong love affair with Penn State ever since then.
That's amazing. And that continued as a student, right? You were involved in many things, including walking backwards into history as a Lion ambassador. Talk about your campus involvement as a student.
Yeah, so from that first campus tour, I was really impressed with the line ambassadors, and it was a relatively new organization back then, because I'm kind of old, Paul. So it was in the starting stages back then, but I was just really impressed with how engaged the students that gave the tour were, how their knowledge of the university and all of that. So yeah, I did apply to be a line ambassador my sophomore year at Penn State, and was lucky, privileged, excited to get accepted into the program, and spent a lot of my time with the line ambassadors. And man, we did some really great work while I was there. Some of the traditions that still stand today. Now the names might have slightly changed, but like Be Apart from the Start or 0 Year Reunion were all started during my time as a line ambassador. So really proud of some of the traditions that we started that have lasted the time at Penn State. And then I was also involved in other things as well, right? So I was involved in our Black Student Union. I was a member of Gamma Sigma Sigma service sorority. And yeah, just engaged in campus in a lot of different ways, a lot of different community events and things of that nature.
Talk about some of your favorite memories from your time at Penn State.
All right, I'll try to talk about the ones that can't get me in trouble, Paul. I swear, like if I think that if cell phones had been around when we were in school, I'm not sure I'd be having the career that I have today.
We've all been in trouble.
Or wouldn't have had as much fun as I did in school. But right. Yeah, so yeah, just some great memories, not only from my years at Penn State, but from the years after graduating even. And that's, I think, one of the things that I appreciate most about Penn State and about our community. It really is a community where we support each other, we lift each other up, we're there to celebrate life's great events and to help each other through life's toughest events. And so, yeah, so many memories. It's hard to even pick one, but if I had to go to one or two, it would probably be that when I was in school, we competed in football for a national championship twice. So the trip to the Orange Bowl and the trip out to Tempe, Arizona, where we won the national championship, are memories that certainly last for a lifetime, and were just great fun experiences with all of my Penn State crew. Some of who I see have joined us on the call here today. I see you guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some great times in Penn State history. Yeah, during your time, playing for 2 national championships. There was the class of '86, I believe, or the class of, if you were fifth year, some of those guys actually played for 3 national championships. Well, they were first years on the '82 team, and then played in '85 and '86. And so, what a great run for the Nittany Lions during that time. This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Wanda Bryant Hope. She's the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Johnson & Johnson. So at this point in the show, I usually ask our guests to walk us through their career, but you've spent your entire 30-plus year career with J&J or one of their subsidiaries at Janssen Pharmaceutical. What is it about the company that has kept you as a loyal team member?
Yeah, when I think about Johnson & Johnson, and I have had a long career, right? It's pretty much the only company I ever worked for. I worked for one other company for a little teeny bit of time before joining J&J. But, when I think about Johnson & Johnson and why I've stayed for so long, it's because it's an organization that aligns with my personal values and my personal mission. J&J is an organization that I have always felt supported in, always had development, always had opportunity for growth. and always had opportunities to step into new situations, new markets, new customer bases. So there's never been a dull moment. So I often hear people say, like, Wanda, how did you stay with one company for so long? But you have to understand Johnson & Johnson. So it's not just one company. It's actually made up of about 250 plus different operating organizations. And during my career, I've had the opportunity to work for, I believe, 8 different companies within J&J. And I've had about 16 or so different job titles, different job responsibilities within J&J. So there's never been a dull moment. There's always been, new products, new customers, new markets, moving into different life cycles of a product or a business, starting up businesses, closing down businesses. And all of those things have helped me to stretch and grow. And when you perform well at J&J, you get access to other opportunities. The other thing that I've appreciated about J&J and my career at J&J, which is not so different than many others, right? I'm not an anomaly at J&J, is the opportunity to kind of move into areas that are different and unique, right? So I started out my career in sales. And I worked my way up through sales and marketing, and I could take you through all my roles rapidly, right? I started out as a territory-based sales rep for Janssen. I then became a hospital rep. I then moved into the home office as a sales training manager. I then became the manager of strategic alliances, which was a totally new role that we invented just for me. Now we have whole companies that do strategic alliances, but it was just me when we started it out. I then moved to my next Johnson & Johnson company, which was Ortho McNeil at the time, where I was a regional business director, a product director, a national sales director. Then to my third company, which was Pharmaceutical Group Strategic Marketing, where I was a global marketing leader. Then to my next company, which was Ortho Biotech, where that was when I stepped into more senior leader roles, and that was my first vice president role. And I was vice president of a couple of different franchises responsible for sales and marketing nationally in the US. And then I had a baby. My son Tyler is 15. He just turned 15. And as we say at J&J, having a baby changes everything, Paul, right? And so I just recognize that with the job that I had as a vice president of sales and marketing and the amount of travel that I was doing, that I really wasn't being the kind of mother that I wanted to be. And so I went to J&J and said, hey, look, I got to find a different way to do this. I don't want to be on the road 70% of the time, which is pretty much what I was doing. And the organization worked with me. And then I sort of reinvented myself and moved into a vice president of commercial analytics and operations, which then expanded to that role across North America. And then I decided I wanted to try something different and moved into corporate HR. And first as the vice president of global performance and development. And then about 5 years ago, as our chief, first diversity officer, then diversity and inclusion officer, and now chief diversity, equity and inclusion officer. So I've had the opportunity to explore different things that would not be considered a traditional path. And that's one of the reasons that I've stayed with J&J, that constant support, the constant development, and really the opportunity to step into kind of new areas that wouldn't be traditional for my background. And again, my experience is not really unique. So yeah, right. That's why I've been here for so long, because there's never been a dull moment, always been supported, always had new opportunities, and really have had the opportunity to excel at my career and to grow into big leadership positions.
And, we know that there is a great pipeline from Penn State to J&J. Yes. Talk about the power of the Penn State network and what impact the network had on your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talk about this a lot, right? When we're discussing recruiting, et cetera. And there is something about the Penn State environment and the Penn State culture that matches really well with the Johnson & Johnson culture. And I think that's why we do have such a strong pipeline of students that join Johnson & Johnson. And that do extremely well at J&J, right? So we've had some people in really big leadership roles that have been Penn State alum. yeah, and I think that just that there's just sort of this connection on values and who we are, and kind of really hardworking folks that are willing to put in the work to get it done. And when I think about the Penn State network, that helps to fuel that pipeline from Penn State to J&J. So we have sort of a Penn State alum group within Johnson & Johnson, and I am the executive sponsor of our recruiting initiatives for J&J at Penn State. And what that means, though, is that our alum come back to the school to work with students in a variety of ways, whether it's, certainly the recruiting, the typical recruiting, the recruiting fairs, et cetera, but it's also things like mentoring and participating in case studies and lecturing in classrooms and supporting different types of student activities on campus. And so there's a real big connection of the Penn State alum at J&J coming back to Penn State to try to fuel that pipeline of the next generation of students joining our organization.
That's amazing. You talked about in the first answer about the culture and the values of the organization aligning with your personal values. You brought that up again when you talked about the connection between the Penn State culture and J&J culture. Obviously many of us know Johnson & Johnson. We use your products, right? We're familiar with the company, but I wasn't really familiar with it until I read the book, the Culture Code, and learned about the J&J Credo, which is now legendary.
Yeah.
The organization pays attention to its corporate culture. Can you talk a little bit about how the Credo is kind of the North Star for the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So our J&J Credo has been in existence for 78 years now. I think this year, maybe it'll turn 79 years old. And when you look at it, it really, the core of the Credo has been unchanged in all of that time. So yes, we've modernized it a little bit, right? But the core of it has been unchanged, which is really quite amazing when you think that it's almost 80 years old, the foresight that the leaders of J&J had at that time. General Robert Wood Johnson to really put forth something that would stand the test of time and continues to get us through really challenging situations that happen not only in the world, but in our business and things like that. And so when our Credo really has 4 paragraphs that outline the responsibilities that Johnson & Johnson has to the world. The paragraphs, the first paragraph, it talks about the responsibilities that we have to the patients, the consumers, the customers, the mothers, the fathers, the babies that use our products every day. The second paragraph of our Credo talks about our responsibility to our employees for development and fair wages and equal opportunities for jobs and things of that nature. The third paragraph talks about the responsibility that we have to the communities in which we live and work. And really that is about, we want to make sure that we're using our J&J big for good to kind of create a better world and a better society. And the fourth paragraph of our Credo really talks about our shareholders, and it's purposefully aligned in that order. Which is different from many companies that have sort of a purpose statement or what have you. But we truly believe that if we do those first 3 paragraphs right, if we do right by our patients, our consumers, our customers, our employees, and our communities, that our shareholders actually have no choice but to realize a fair return on their investment in J&J. And that formula has worked for us. Certainly for the almost 80 years that the Credo's been in existence, but for the test of time, for the 135 years or so that J&J has been in existence. And we really do use it as a North Star. So it is, when you are, if you walk through a J&J building, you will see the Credo everywhere. You'll see it as soon as you walk in the door, you'll see it in every office. And it's something we use daily around decision making. So when we get into situations where we have to figure out what to do, right? And we know most situations aren't black and white, most are in that gray area. We use the Credo as a guide around our decision making to make sure that we're living into our responsibilities to all those we serve.
And you talked about the Credo modernizing over time,
Yeah.
right? Part of that modernization has been the organization's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2015, you were named the Chief Diversity Officer at J&J, a shift from your previous roles. Talk about your role in the work of your team, and kind of the motto or slogan or whatever you would call it, kind of be yourself, change the world, the opportunity to be yourself.
Yeah, so that's our vision around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you know, we formulated that vision because we really want to make sure that all of our employees have the opportunity to be their true, authentic self, bring their full selves into work, share their ideas, share their perspectives. And if we create the environment where everyone can do that successfully, we really believe that we drive innovation and growth that helps us solve some of the world's most challenging health-related issues. And so that's where our vision, be yourself, change the world, came from. You know, and my role as the chief now diversity, equity, and inclusion around for J&J globally is really to work with my team. And I have a fantastic team that does such great work, but it's to work with my team to develop our global enterprise strategies and really to sort of put forth the path for the rest of the organization. And so we're developing those strategies to help us live into a couple of different things, to help us become an even more inclusive environment everywhere around the world, to help us build a workforce that reflects the communities that we serve every day, and to better connect diversity, equity, and inclusion into our businesses to drive that innovation and growth, because we believe that if you really understand the diverse and the multicultural markets, consumers, patients that we serve, then you have a better opportunity to understand their needs and to develop solutions for their needs that are meaningful to that population and communicate in a way that resonates with them. So that's really what we're focused on in my team, but we partner across the organization. So while my team is responsible for the global enterprise strategy, everyone at J&J owns diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's a part of everyone's responsibilities. In fact, all of our people leaders now have goals related directly to diversity, equity, and inclusion that ties into performance and compensation, et cetera. So we sort of set the strategy, and the rest of the organization lives into that strategy and executes. Now, one of the other things that's important is while we have a global enterprise strategy, we also know that it has to be locally relevant and meaningful, right? And so we also work around the organization to make sure that we can develop the tools, the resources, the initiatives to live into the needs of that local marketplace. And I can share a couple of examples of that if you'd like.
I'd actually like that, because that was going to be my follow-up question. I was had a similar conversation with Matt Schuyler, a fellow Lion ambassador, about the work that
Matt and I were there together. Yep.
That's right. About what they're doing at Hilton, and it's, DE&I is a complex issue when you're talking about it from kind of the United States and American perspective, right? But then you incorporate hundreds of countries all around the world, right, with employees and living all over the globe, and it means different things in different places. Yeah. So I think a couple of examples would be really interesting for us to understand what a global enterprise DE&I strategy looks like.
All right. So first, let's go to the country of Japan, right? So when we think about Japan, we know that women traditionally, globally, this is the case, but in Japan, even a little further behind some other parts of the world, that women haven't been engaged in the workforce. And so the government of Japan really is trying to engage women more, because they know that they need the power of that full workforce to continue to grow their economy, their GDP, et cetera. And so when we thought about that at J&J, we really took a step back and tried to understand, well, why is that? And there were a couple of reasons. For certain, it was the cultural reasons and expectations of women, but then there were some real tactical reasons of why women why it wasn't possible or feasible for many women to join the workforce. One of them was just the culture of what the workday looks like in the country of Japan. So the workday in Japan is very long, and people stay at the office sometimes for 12, 14, 15 hours as a standard. Very often people live very far from the offices. And so even the travel time is difficult. And the workers in Japan, sometimes very much their value is determined by, are you staying really late? And if you're not staying late, if you're not there at 10, 11 o'clock at night, then people may question whether or not you're really committed to your work in your company. And so we recognized that that was something that was really preventing women from joining the workforce, because they also had family responsibilities at home. So we launched a program called the Switch Program. And the Switch Program was about switching the mindsets of our employee base to redefine what a healthy work day and a healthy work-life balance look like. And it also involved doing some very physical things like switching the lights and the air conditioning and the heat off in the buildings at a certain time so that people were forced to go home. But what that did was it really started to change and shift the behavior of what a healthy work experience, a healthy work day looked like in the company of J&J. And by doing that, we became a very attractive place for women to want to work, and have therefore then increased our number of women. In fact, a couple of years after we started that program, and it hasn't been in place for that long. I think it's been about 5 years. But 2 years after that, we actually were named the #1 company for women in Japan on the Nikkei Women's list of best companies for women to work for in Japan. So that's one example. Another example of how we live into this, and this is one of connecting diversity, equity, and inclusion into the businesses. So when you create the right culture where employees feel included, feel like they belong, feel like they have a voice, they will come up with some wonderful, innovative ideas to help grow your business. So now let's go to the country of Malaysia. When we look at the country of Malaysia, we know that it's predominantly a Muslim country, and the Muslim population does not partake of alcohol. Well, one of our big consumer products is Listerine. Many people may not know that, but Listerine is a Johnson & Johnson product. And when you think about mouthwash in general, it's alcohol-based. So as you can imagine, there's not going to be much of a market for alcohol-based mouthwashes in countries that are predominantly Muslim and don't partake of alcohol. So our employees, because they had this inclusive environment, felt comfortable in bringing forth this idea and came forth to the organization and said, hey, you know, we have this great idea that we should develop a different formulation of Listerine that's not based on alcohol, but based on green tea. And so the organization listened, right? And this is all about part of having an inclusive culture, listened. And within a relatively short amount of time, we actually did launch a green tea formulation of Listerine. So it has no alcohol. And in that, we had some phenomenal results. Now, don't quote me on these numbers because I'm not looking at anything, but if I remember correctly, in the first month after launch, we gained about 7 points of market share, which if you know anything about the consumer product goods, that is absolutely amazing results. And within the first 3 months after launch, we were triple what any other mouthwash type of product was on the market. It was so successful that we've now launched this green tea Listerine in several markets around the world. But that's really what, when we talk about being locally relevant, those are a couple of examples of understanding what DEI means in whatever market you're in around the world, and being able to provide solutions to help the needs of that specific marketplace.
It's two great examples, because the first one talks about how DE&I drives employee satisfaction and work-life balance, right, which are critical to the bottom line of an organization. The second one talks about actual driving of revenue, right? And gain of market share. So a DE&I strategy that actually drives bottom line results. That
Yep.
kind of leads into my next question. For J&J to heavily invest in this work says a lot about the company. In addition to doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do, it turns out, through your examples, that it also makes good business sense, that there are some bottom line impacts. Can you talk about some of those bottom line impacts that companies with diverse and inclusive workforces experience?
Absolutely. And I just shared one example from our own company, right? And I have several more of those, but if I kind of raise up and look more generally at the data, the data is really clear here, Paul, that there is absolutely a link to companies that are more diverse and more inclusive having better business results. So, what I like to say is DE&I, it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the business thing to do, right? And those that get this right will be the companies that are more successful over time, and will stand the test of time. And so I'll quote a couple of studies. One is one that's done by McKinsey, and they refresh this about every 2 years or so. But this one was done in 2020, in January 2020. And basically what they looked at was publicly traded companies. They looked at their executive teams, and they found that companies that were in the top quartile of gender diversity were 25% more likely to outperform their peer set when it came to income before taxes. Companies that were in the top quartile of ethnic diversity were 36% more likely to outperform their peer set. And companies that were in the bottom quartile of either gender or diversity were 27% more likely to underperform versus their peer set. So that's just one study, and there are tons of studies out there that support this data, that DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, really do help to drive business results. A study by Deloitte that was also conducted in 2020, I believe, found that companies that had inclusive environments were 8 times more likely to have better business outcomes, 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, 3 times more likely to be high performing, and 2 times more likely to meet or exceed their financial targets versus companies whose employees did not perceive they had an inclusive culture. So there is absolutely something there, and there is absolutely a link to business performance, to innovation, to financial performance for companies and organizations that figure out how to get this right. And and I think an important point here, Paul, is that no one has totally figured this out yet, right? So this is about people starting on their journey and continuing to progress their journey. And look, as good as I believe Johnson & Johnson is around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I do believe we do this better than most, right? And we've got tons of results and outcomes to prove that, we're still on our own journey, and we're still figuring out how do we continue to get better around this. The other thing, Paul, is that over the last year, clearly there has been an awakening, if you will, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And there's 2 big events that were driving that. The first event was, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw disproportionate impact to Black and Brown communities, not only here in the US, but globally. And then, of course, there was the murder of George Floyd, where we started to see, where people started to recognize some of the inequities that were happening around our justice system. And then that led to conversations around inequities in all other areas of society, which are true and factual inequities. And so in that moment, there really was sort of this awakening where diversity, equity, and inclusion rose to the top of society's consciousness. And we started to see and continue to see a different level of demand for organizations around their responsibility around driving diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations. We're seeing things like, when you look at Generation Z, there's been a study that said that more than 70% of the members of Generation Z said that they would only work for companies that responded in a positive way in this moment. Consumers are making statements that they're going to use their purchasing power to only support companies and products that are kind of standing up and taking the right actions in this current environment. So it's not only the proof over the multiple years around diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's also now this societal demand for DEI in a different way and for accountability and transparency that companies and organizations really have to not only pay attention to, but have to figure out how they live into.
Well, Wanda, for most people who are hearing you and meeting you and seeing you for the first time, they can feel the passion that you have for this work coming out. For those of us who know you maybe a little bit better than that, know that this is a continuation of the family business in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And that you're carrying on the work of your mother, who was an activist in the South during the height of the civil rights fight. I'm wondering if you might share that story and the influence that she had on you.
Yeah, and Paul, you're right. I think that this is work that I am meant to be doing, and I was probably born to do. And I'm glad to hear that that passion comes through, because I am definitely dedicated, committed, and passionate to this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Paul, what some people may not know, and what may surprise them, is that the most valuable possession in my family is a roll of toilet paper. Now, I know, Paul, you and the others on the call here are probably saying, Wanda, what are you talking about? Why is a roll of toilet paper so important to you? Well, it started in February 1962, where students at Morris College, a small historically Black college, should have been attending classes, studying, or simply enjoying college life. But Paul, these students had a different purpose. They actually had a higher calling. These students were actively involved in the civil rights movement. And Paul, as you said, my mom, Tilly Bing Bryant, was one of those students. And that afternoon in February, she went to the Crest 5 and Dime store to participate in a lunch counter sit-in. Now, if you and our guests remember our history back then in the 1960s, particularly in the South, Black people weren't allowed to eat at the same lunch counters, weren't allowed to drink from the same water fountains, weren't even allowed to use the same restrooms as white people. So this was truly a brave and courageous act, especially for a young lady who was only 19 years old. Like, that part truly blows my mind, how young she and all of these students were that were engaged in this work. Now, Paul, my mom has a really light complexion. So she was able to go in and sit down at that lunch counter, order her food without really being detected as a Black person. And that day she ordered a simple burger and a soda. When the food arrived, she motioned for the Black male students to come in. She pushed the food down to them and they began to eat. Now, Paul, as you can imagine, in that environment in the South in that day, chaos ensued. The white customers that were in that store became enraged. The sheriff officers were called and quickly arrived carrying blackjacks and billy clubs. And Paul, as they dragged those students out of that Crest 5 and Dime store, the students were threatened outside by police dogs and water hoses as they were tossed into the back of the sheriff's vehicles and hauled off to jail. Now, that was one of the many times that my mom was jailed during the civil rights movement. And during that particular jail stay, she decided to write her story on a roll of jailhouse toilet paper. And on this roll of toilet paper, she writes about her fight for freedom and equality and why it's so important to her. And Paul, the passage that means the most to me is when she actually writes to her mom and she says, Mommy, I know you told me not to get in jail. She says, but I don't mind being in jail, she writes, as long as one day I know that my children will have privilege and can do all the things that we're fighting so hard for today. So, that's kind of my mom's story. And I grew up looking at this roll of toilet paper proudly displayed in our china cabinet in my mom's jailhouse tin cup, like you see in those old movies,
Right.
right? Clanking on the thing, like this jailhouse tin cup with her name painted on it in red fingernail polish because she was 19, likely, right? But I grew up looking at this roll of toilet paper and I'm going to say not fully understanding the value of it until I was much older in life. But I grew up looking at this and hearing her stories of the civil rights movement. My dad was also involved in civil rights, like just hearing stories of some of their struggles, even here in New Jersey, quite frankly. So this wasn't just a Southern thing, but their struggles of trying to get their first apartment where they were denied when they were a young married couple, and they knew that there was availability. So they reached out to some civil rights organizations, and the civil rights organization sent a white couple in to find an apartment, and lo and behold, there was one available. And so then they figured out how to get that apartment through some potential legal action. But just hearing that fight of constantly, trying to not only do what was right for themselves and fight for their own freedom and equality, but doing things to try to create freedom and equality and equity for others in the world as well. So that's a part of how I grew up, and I think just a part of who I am. And I think that links directly into the work that I do today.
Absolutely. And you have been so generous to share that story on a number of occasions. And it actually caught the attention of Henry Louis Gates. For those folks who don't know about Professor Henry Louis Gates at Harvard, he also has a PBS show called Finding Your Roots. Can you share a little bit about some of the work that you did with him?
Yeah, so Johnson & Johnson has been a long-standing supporter of Professor Gates and his work on PBS. And we really helped him kind of launch several of his shows. And we do that because Professor Gates is really engaged in educating about Black history from a number of ways, right? And so we think it's important programming to help create education and the right conversation to help us move forward as a society. But in one of the programs that we support is Finding Your Roots. And so a couple of years ago, Professor Gates decided that he was going to do the Finding Your Roots program for one of the J&J employees. And my goodness, I was lucky and blessed and honored to be selected for that opportunity. And so we did a show at J&J, just like you see on TV. I had no idea what he was going to find. My dad was still alive at the time, so my parents, we all did our DNA test, and he took his team of genealogists and went about researching my roots. And oh my goodness, what an amazing journey and that was for me and my family. And so one of the things that he asked Paul was sort of the folklore of the family,
right,
so that he could either prove or disprove them. And one of the things that my mom had always said was that her family were never slaves. Now, we always thought, but Mom, like, we were Black people in the South, like, how is it even possible that our family was never slaves, right? And so, but I told him, I said, here's one of the pieces of folklore. And so he's like, oh, okay, well, let's check that out. And so as the genealogist got to work, what they, and the historians that work on his team, what they found, and this was like amazing when he revealed it in our J&J show. He said, and now you got to imagine my parents are sitting in the front row watching this as well. So my mom is very much sitting there like, I told you so. I told you so. Like everything that he found, she's like, I told you so. I don't know why you kids don't listen to me. But what he found was that my mom's ancestor, the earliest ancestor they could trace, actually purchased his freedom in 1754. And then about 6 months after purchasing his freedom, he purchased the freedom of his wife and his 4 children. And so since that time period, my mom's family really were free Black people living in South Carolina. They owned land, they had farms, they had businesses, and all of this during the era of slavery, all the way through. The family still lives on the same, the same sort of area of land, and still there's still family members that are there. And so that was quite an amazing discovery to actually even see the papers. He literally found the papers of this relative, and on the papers it simply says free man Bing. Bing is my mom's maiden name, but it lists out his wife's name, his children's name, and to actually see those papers of your ancestors purchasing their freedom was, wow. It was just an amazing experience, and so many other stories that were really cool. I was like, man, I have a really cool family.
An amazing family that hands folklore down from generation to generation, that maintains the kind of the symbols, like the jailhouse tin cup and
Yeah.
the toilet paper. I mean, it's an amazing history that your family has, and what a great story. I want to shift back a little bit to your involvement with Penn State, because you've continued your involvement through Smeal, but in 2020, your alma mater has asked a lot of you. We asked you to be the commencement speaker, which was wonderful, and I know one of the highlights of the first ever virtual commencement at Penn State, one of the highlights for our class of 2020, of which I was a member of. I sat there and I watched your speech for my master's graduation. So thank you for doing that. But you're also asked to come back and do some of the real serious and hard work on the commission, the Presidential Commission for Racism, Bias, and Community Safety. Can you talk a little bit about the work of that committee?
Yeah, well, Paul, I think that this was a really critical period, a really critical committee. And as we said, it was sort of born out of the events of the last 12 months or so, starting with the murder of George Floyd and the disparities that we saw with COVID-19. And so, I think that President Barron was spot on when he said we need to have someone really look at our Penn State community and our Penn State culture, and figure out if we're living into who we believe we are and who we want to be in the right way. And so he formulated this committee on that was really sort of focused on racial and social justice, that had some amazing professors and faculty members and administrators on, like Danielle Conway, who's our dean of the Donald Farage Professor, Dickens College of Law, and the Donald Farage Professor of Law there. And so just some amazing people to help engage in this effort. And based on that work, President Barron has agreed to further, number one, look at sort of an enterprise approach around diversity, equity, and inclusion, to make sure that we have that overarching strategy of who we want to be and how we live into this, and that we're all sort of talking and speaking the same language and moving towards the same goals. He then also has committed to looking at a diversity, equity, and inclusion audit subcommittee, looking at an anti-racist center to figure out how we can use our power as J&J to help educate not only ourselves, but the rest of the world. Also a truth and reconciliation subcommittee, which would look at, really, again, sort of look at making sure that we're understanding the historical perspective in a truthful and honest way. Because if we don't recognize the history and see it for what it is, we'll never be able to move forward. And so that Truth and Reconciliation Process Subcommittee will continue to look at that, and then continuing to just explore what we do to live into our Penn State commitments around racial and social justice. So I think that this is extremely important work. I commend President Barron for putting forth this subcommittee, and really commend all of the leaders across J&J that were a part of it. Another friend, colleague that I partner closely with that sits on our board of trustees really is also driving a lot of this work as well. So it's important work, and I'm really glad that we're engaged in it.
Absolutely. So you have received a number of recognitions from Penn State, whether it's the recognitions that you received from the Smeal College of Business for your service or from the Black Alumni Reunion Committee. Can you talk a little bit about what being recognized by your alma mater means to you?
Yeah, it's probably the most meaningful recognition that I get in the work that I do, right? So because when I think about Penn State, it really is family to me. And so having the people that you love and care about recognize what you do is just truly meaningful and moving. So it continues when I get those kinds of recognitions, it continues to energize me. And it really sort of powers me to keep going even faster and stronger. So I appreciate all of the recognition that I've received, and it truly does give me the energy to just keep going and say, all right, now what do we do next? What's the next step? What's the next thing? How do we make even a bigger difference in whatever committee it is or work that I'm doing?
This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm joined by Wanda Bryant Hope. She's the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Johnson & Johnson. All right, Wanda, we like to have a little bit of fun here on Coffee Hour. So I'm going to ask you some quick hitter questions, and you tell me kind of the first thing that pops to mind.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Okay, so, we'll try. Don't get me fired, Paul. Okay?
I won't. We touched on this a little bit, but maybe your favorite Penn State memory.
Favorite Penn State memory, Tempe, Arizona, Fiesta Bowl win.
How about your favorite class at Penn State?
Favorite class was a marketing class that was, I'm not going to remember the exact name of the class, but it was one of my marketing classes where we really were doing like a lot of case studies and really understanding how people think and how to shift behaviors.
How about if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Dinner with anyone. If I could have dinner with anyone, it would be my grandmother, who passed away now about 10 years ago. As I'm doing this work and learning more about my ancestry and my background, I realized there's so many questions I would have asked her. So I would go back and have dinner with grandma and just really ask her all these questions around her background and our ancestry that I hope are not stories that are lost forever and that we can someday uncover.
How about your most unusual "we are" moment? Kind of the unexpected place or unusual place where you heard "we are" and it caught you off guard. So
many. So I am known for shouting "we are" wherever I go, whenever I see something that I'm like, hey, that's a Penn Stater. My son is always like, Mom, please don't do it, but we'll get him there soon enough because I hope that we have a next generation Penn Stater. But I've had some interesting experiences, whether it's in an airport in Japan where I had on, and I usually travel in something Penn State, right? And I like hear behind me, "we are," and I'm like, really? Because I'm in Tokyo. Okay, yes, Penn State. Another interesting one was I was actually presenting in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I was, and it's funny, like I was thinking about the stories I wanted to tell. And I was like, we're in Brazil. Like they're not going to really understand this Penn State reference, but I did it anyway. And sure enough, I hear "we are" from the audience. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So amazing. It's great.
How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Oh, that's football. That's easy peasy.
And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Favorite is the sticky bun flavor.
Oh, okay.
I feel like you get 2 in 1 there with the sticky bun. You get the sticky bun flavor and some creamier ice cream. You can't go wrong with that.
Absolutely. We have a couple of questions that have been pre-submitted. We are running out of time, but I do want to get to a couple of these questions if we have a minute or two. First, if someone's interested in getting into the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion professionally, what's the pathway, or what would you recommend that somebody look into?
Yeah, so this work is really mission driven, passion driven work. It's not easy work, but it is so rewarding. And so, I think that people can get into this space from all different areas. Certainly, we have a lot of people that have HR backgrounds, but what we're starting to see now in companies is backgrounds that are more similar to mine, people that have really strong business backgrounds that then make a transition into this work. And I think that formula, it certainly has worked for me, and I see it working for others, because so much of the way that you have to execute the work is through the business, right? It's not something that you want HR to own or HR to do is sort of, here's how we're going to manage our business, and here's what we're going to do for DE&I. You have to have it integrated into everything that you do, whether it's the work that you're doing around talent, your talent processes, recruiting, development, engaging employees, onboarding employees, whatever it is, to actually how you develop your business strategy so that you can make sure that you're serving the needs of the diversity of the markets that you serve. So I think that this is work that you can get into from a variety of ways and backgrounds, but you do have to know, you have to be able to figure out how to integrate it throughout everything that your organization is doing. And that's the key, I think, to success in these kinds of roles.
Another question coming in. We took our new joint venture company from basic diversity levels through several steps to global celebration of different cultures back in the early 1990s. It was successful and added to the foundation on which we built a JV that survived and had become a global market leader. They used the live theater performances, acting out diverse situations to the infusion of Covey's habit number 6 materials into their leadership development program. Are today's learning efforts much the same, or anything new that you would want to share in terms of how we go about kind of the education around diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so I think that's a fantastic question. And Paul, what I would do is I would actually take that question back a step, because what we typically hear and what people typically think when they think about diversity, equity, and inclusion is, what's the program, right? And we see this time and time again, right? I need to do something about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to put forth an unconscious bias training program, or I'm going to put people through some kind of training. And I think that is one of the reasons that many companies have not advanced further with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's not about the program or the activity. We have to take a step back, and it actually has to be about the strategy. So we need to create a mindset where we are treating diversity, equity, and inclusion just as we would any other business opportunity or business challenge. And we need to have a strategic plan that outlines where our greatest challenges are, our greatest opportunities are, outlines metrics for success, is able to measure our success, and then allows us to disproportionately invest in the things that matter to our employees and to the external stakeholders that we serve, and allows us to try things, to fail fast, to double investment in things that work. And I think that part of the challenge is that we always think about DE&I as what's the next program, and we ought to be thinking about it is, what is the strategy that integrates this into everything that we do in our organization and in our business, just as we would any other opportunity that comes the way of our business?
So another question coming in is, well, let me ask it this way. So some companies aren't as committed to this work as others are. If individuals want to make a commitment, where would they go to find resources? Like the question specifically that came in is, how do we assist faculty in staying progressive with regard to LGBTQ concepts and vocabulary? But I'm maybe taking it a step above that, right? If somebody's looking to self-educate on this topic because they're not getting that from other angles, what are some resources you might point them to?
Yeah, and so there are so many resources that are out here. And so, Paul, the first thing is that people have to make the commitment that they're going to go on their own learning journey, right? And I think that that step is such an important one because, you know, people have to sort of take responsibility for it themselves. And there are tons of resources. You know, honestly, if you just Google, you know, anything, history of racism, how to be an anti-racist, how to, you know, what is unconscious bias, you're going to get tons and tons of resources that you can pick and choose what works for you. But then there are also, you know, from an educational standpoint, you know, there are many organizations that focus on this. So if you're looking at, if you want to look at any particular group, you know, you could go to, like, if you want to understand the experience of Black Americans more, you can go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture webpage, and they have a ton of resources there to help you understand and go on your own personal learning journey around the Black experience in America. Same thing, you can just Google, you know, organizations that support LGBTQ, and the resources are out there. People just have to take that first step to do a little bit of the work.
Well, Wanda, we have taken too much of your time this morning, but you've been so generous to share your story with us, and for that, we're truly grateful. Thanks for joining us on Coffee Hour this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, Paul.
It's always good to catch up with you. And I want to thank everybody who has zoomed in with us this morning, or if you are catching us on Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you so much for your support. If you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for? Go to our website today at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for all you do for the glory, for the future, and for the university. We are
Penn State.